The Swell Season podcast is recorded at the Newsstand Studio at Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan and is distributed by Swell Season Surf Radio. Hello and welcome to Swell Season Surf Radio. I am your host for this episode, Tyler Brewer, and holy crap, we have a freaking awesome guest for us on this episode. I am so pumped. We have Patti Paniccia, and now if you are not familiar with her, she's probably one of the most badass women in surf history. She was one of the top-ranked surfers during the 70s and 80s, and was one of 6 women who competed on the first Women's World Pro Tour in 1976. She also co-founded the Pro Surfing for Women and was working as a director of women's division alongside Fred Hemmings and Randy Rarick to launch the IPS Pro Tour, which was the equivalent of the WSL today. Patti also is an adjunct law professor at Pepperdine Law School in Malibu, where she teaches employment discrimination, gender and the law, and First Amendment law, and founded the Patti Paniccia Law School Scholarship to assist law students parenting minor children. She's also a hearing officer for the Los Angeles County Employee Relations Commission, but she's also a freaking former CNN correspondent, and you'll hear the professionalism here in our interview. She received an Emmy nomination for an investigative series on the court system's failure to deal adequately with infant abuse, and in 2000, she was sent on a nationwide book tour by Ballantine/Random House for her book Work Smarts for Women, the Essential Sex Discrimination Survival Guide, and continues to be regularly interviewed on all sorts of media, and she's obviously here. She also has a husband, 2 daughters, one of which sings opera, and the other is a business executive. So the list keeps going on, and it's pretty awesome, and I'm like super nerding out and excited to have her here. Patti, welcome to Swell Season. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled by your rendition of my long and storied past.
It's amazing, you know, like how much you can fit into a lifetime too, and like all the things you've achieved. It's amazing, but also like fascinating in the sense that it's like one hand surf related and professional surfing, but then it's professional related on top of it, which not many surfers can claim, particularly of your generation, particularly on the men's side. Not many of them really explored beyond the surfing world. So, I mean, it's kind of amazing what you were able to achieve. I wonder, like, you know, how much of having to fight for access in the surf had to do with you going on in your professional life.
Wow, that's a really good question. You know, I think it feels the same. You know, whether I was trying to get into television news, you know, it was a quest. You just put yourself 110% in it. When I was at White House press conferences or trying to take the bar, where normally I would be like kind of concerned or maybe scary, I think, this is nowhere near as bad as surfing Big Sunset in terms of at least I'm not going to die if I wake up. Or nowhere near as good as surfing Big Sunset, rather. But
that too.
You know, but I think, banging our heads against the wall in the 70s really gave me a sense of who I was, and I think it really did empower me, you know, to keep that with me.
Absolutely. I know. So like I have a couple co-hosts who normally do the show with me, and unfortunately they couldn't make it. And they were Karen, who is just a huge fan. I know she's kind of bummed she couldn't make it here, but she was super excited that you're going to be on the show. And yeah, we were kind of geeking out talking about it. So I guess I want to start kind of from the beginning, even like first, how did you get into surfing? Because like my co-host Karen and I, we interviewed Sandy Ordile late last year, and the way Sandy grew up surfing was she didn't know it was anything different about her learning to surf. It was just like, yeah, I'm just surfing with the boys and it's not a big deal. And she didn't realize it was such a big deal until she left her home. And I'm wondering if it was a similar experience for you or something completely opposite.
Well, first of all, I like your co-host. I like listening to her. I heard Sandy's interview, and I would love to meet her sometime.
Yeah.
She did a great job. I don't know. You know, my background was not textbook for most surfers. It was very odd. So I don't know, because I grew up the daughter of immigrants in a bad neighborhood in Los Angeles, inner city,
Really?
you know, East LA. And I only discovered surfing when I visited my grandparents in Huntington Beach. And it was not an expensive town back then. We're talking about the late 50s, early 60s. There you go, my age, 69 and counting.
11
and so
teen.
we would go to the Huntington Beach pier, and I'd watch the surfers. We'd be catching fish, and I'd see the guys in the water, and I just thought, this is cool. I want to do that. It never did occur to me, in answer to your question, that they were all guys and I was a little girl. You know, I used to just run down to the beach and say, "Can I try your surfboard?" You know, it's quite pitiful, actually, isn't it?
I feel like a lot of surfers have that though with growing up. It was like some kids stole boards, or like when boards went loose, you know, particularly in that time period. That's how a lot of kids got their start. Let me ask, like, then your parents so you're first generation. Where were they from originally?
Italy,
Italy.
the hills
Okay.
of Umbria. Mm-hmm.
What were they progressive in the sense where it's like your father like super encouraging of you to not let gender boundaries limit you, or and I'm curious like what their thoughts were when you started surfing?
Well, honestly, you know, he was just trying to feed us. We were really poor when we were young, so he wasn't paying much attention. And he was. I mean, he was the smartest guy I know, my dad, but he had no education past third grade, but he had started a business, and he was a contractor, and he did very well. So over the years, I remember getting a bathtub thinking, oh my God, we're rich, you know. It's like, so life was getting better. And then they bought a house in Huntington, and then they, expanded to Hawaii, and it was like, wow. But so my dad didn't know what to make of it, because when you're trying to, scrape, and they used to live, by the way, on the East Coast in New Jersey before I was born. But when you're trying to scrape by and you've got a kid that says, I'd like to go surfing, it just doesn't flow, right? So they never quite got it. They weren't fond of it. But on the other hand, I was on my own from the time I was about 17. I was gone. I mean, they didn't say go to college, or, I just figured, well, I guess I'm old enough now. So, yeah.
Wow. And they also moved to Hawaii as well. At what age was that?
Well, my dad started doing business there when I was about 12 or 13, and I was kicking and screaming. We still were living in Los Angeles, too, and we still had the house near my grandparents in Huntington Beach, but his business was getting better, so he'd say, come on, we're going to do business in Hawaii, and I go, I don't want to go there. What did I know, right? So they left me on the mainland a lot, and when I was, 13, 14, I would just stay there. But then I realized, hey, what do I want to do? be in the middle of all these, like this drug culture in Los Angeles, right? Because that's what I was in the midst of, and I'm part of, or whatever, just a little kid even. Or look at all these really cool people and nice people, and I really, really got on with the guys from Wailua and Haleiwa. I felt most at home with them on the North Shore, more than the visiting surfers. So that was sort of my group,
What was the difference then, like, of the surfers, like, in Huntington Beach compared to Hawaii? Like, was there a different, obviously it was a different attitude, but I guess what I'm trying to get is, like, was there a different attitude toward women surfing particularly?
I wouldn't even call myself a surfer in Huntington, so I really never got to know anybody. I would just sort of paddle out, usually by myself. Sometimes I'd bring a girlfriend with me, from school or something. But I never really became part of any kind of tribe until I was in Hawaii. So I don't know. In Hawaii, we were, the guys were welcoming. To this day, I'll go to Haleiwa, and that's where they all sit on a picnic bench. They're all in their 70s now, and they'll go out with their stand-up boards and catch waves. It's still my favorite crew. It's still my favorite crew.
Because I get a sense, and this is difficult for me to totally understand, but I get a sense that Hawaiian culture was more equal in terms of women and how they treated women and respected them in the lineup and in terms of surfing. And from research and reading I've done on ancient Hawaiian culture, it was quite equal in that sense. There was no major divide, and some of the best surfers were women surfers even. So it's just I always find that really fascinating, how particularly like mainland surf culture and its interpretation of surfing, and how it butt up with Hawaiian surf culture almost, and how the two kind of fused even. Does that sense kind of how you kind of saw that, I guess, or could see that?
Well, I looked at it through like the microcosm of the North Shore. I lived in Wailua, which is just outside of Haleiwa. And so the mainland guys I would mostly meet when they came to Hawaii. I didn't, by the time I was 18 or so, I just really didn't surf on the mainland until I moved over there many years later to go to law school at Pepperdine on the beach at Malibu. No coincidence there.
Not at all.
But and I don't know. I never sensed the difference, but I know this: the Hawaiians were always welcoming to women. It wasn't so unusual for them to see. There weren't a lot of women, especially on the North Shore. There were a handful of us in the early 70s, but the Hawaiians and the local people were always welcoming, I found, in the water.
Yeah. Now, who is the first female that you started surfing with in Hawaii?
My best friend back then was Sally Prang, and she was a pro surfer, and she, to this day, surfs better than me. I just never caught up to her. I bought a surfboard off of her. I wanted a smaller board. I only had this one board.
I believe it was a 6'3", right?
My first board was like 9, but yeah.
No, what you bought off her was a 6'3".
Oh yeah, yeah. It was a small yellow board. I can't remember the label on it, but I heard she was selling it, and she said she wanted. I can't remember. She said what she wanted to buy it for, and I offered her less, thinking we would negotiate. And Sally goes, "Oh, if that's all you can afford, you can have it for that much." And I went, "What is wrong with this person?" Sweet Sally and scrappy me, right? From LA. And and then she said, "I'll paddle out with you and see if you like it." And she was just so kind. And then I just surfed with her every day after that. We were the best friends. We surfed everywhere together.
What was like your main spot that you both of you would go out and surf? What were your bread and butter waves?
Well, when I first bought it from her, it was summer, and I had rented this apartment in town. I was only I think barely 18. maybe 17, just across from the Elikai, because the country was flat. So I thought, oh, I'm going to go live in town, right, for the